Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is playing in theaters now. Do you see what I did there, Dan?
I like it.
It was not very good, so thank you. This is an excellent start to our spoiler-filled review. Warning, if you have not seen this movie, check out now, see it, if you like, and come back and see what we thought.
Repeat back what I just said.
I am Groot.
Uh-huh.
I am Groot.
That's right.
I am Groot.
No! No, that's the button that will kill everyone!
Dan, Hal and I already did our spoiler-free review,
Yes.
but I have not heard your thoughts yet.
No.
Let's hear it.
I've been anxious, It's Marvel. It seems like they show these movies so early. It's been like 2 weeks since the review came out. So I liked Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I didn't like it as much as the first one. I'd probably put it about in the middle of the pack for Marvel movies. I know that a lot of people are really loving this movie. I think a big part of it is that these are great characters, and James Gunn loves these characters. And there are some really great character moments. There's some great, humorous, very funny lines. Drax is a standout in this movie. Yondu, for reasons that we'll get into, I think was great in this movie. I just think that it hit a few snags in its structure. It hit a few snags in the storytelling that I didn't really go along with. It hit a few character moments that I wasn't sure about. So, yeah, it's a movie that I liked. I didn't love it, but I enjoyed it, and I think it's really off of the charisma that this cast has.
Yeah. Well, their chemistry is really off the charts, and I think that you're right. One of the things that really came through on Guardians 1 was James Gunn's true affection for the characters. It's so authentic.
Yeah.
And I feel like for filmmakers, that comes through the screen. Like, I really believe that this might sound sort of corny or hyperbolic, but like the essence of the intent really does come through, and you feel it. You feel it, the catharsis as an audience member. So if something is really mercenary and really truly just a cash grab, you feel that.
Right.
Now, I want to say a caveat, because I've been reading some of the comments that are like, tell the truth, you tell how you really feel about this film. What I said in the original review is truly how I feel, which is I went into the first film with slightly lowered expectations.
Yeah.
I had seen a 10-minute preview that actually cut out all the context around the humorous moments, and it fell flat for me.
Right.
So I went in thinking, like, I don't know if this is going to be very good. I ended up loving the film. I've seen it several times. It is my favorite Marvel movie. Having said that, I think for many of us, expectations really do play into how you perceive a film. So when you go in when your expectations are very high, it's very difficult not to be disappointed.
Well, and that's the thing is I try to, like, critically when I'm going into a movie, I try to go in without expectations. I try to say, like, I can't hype this up for myself. I can't think, oh, this is going to be an amazing movie, and anything less, I'm going to be let down. I try to go in with a clean slate. But you can't divorce yourself from the fact that these are great characters that you enjoyed from the first movie. And I think, the expectation game with the first Guardians was nobody knew who these characters were. A lot of people, I thought, were very skeptical, including myself. And James Gunn, I think, blew away even the highest expectations for that first film. So going into this one, like, I don't envy that, having to say, like, oh, everybody loved this movie. It kind of came out of nowhere. People were skeptical, and I, kind of knocked it out of the park. This is a lot of people's favorite Marvel movie. Okay, now I have to do it again.
This is a lot.
And I think that's where it kind of fell into the pitfalls a lot for me, which is that I felt like the characters were almost at times heightened, and it's the jokes. Now we're expecting them to be quippy, so a lot of the jokes, like, it had like maybe a 1 in 3 miss ratio for me. Like, I didn't think all the jokes hit necessarily. It's that problem of having to write a movie about characters that now that people like them, so it's like, oh, well, do I have them do this? And I don't know. I think that expectation game is really hard to meet. But my problems with it weren't that it wasn't as good as I expected it to be. I think a lot of it was that it didn't feel as bad as it did in Age of Ultron, but I thought that there was a little bit for me of that feeling like this is the movie that James Gunn wanted to make. This is the comic book movie that kind of has to happen, and how much of each one are we going to get? Because I feel like the movie that James Gunn wanted to make was the story about Peter Quill and his dad and family issues and, this very character-driven story. But you have to balance that out with, this is what the big comic book movie has to be. And I felt like the third act for this movie really, when the change in Ego came, when the big reveal about Ego was made, for me, the momentum that had been building up kind of stopped dead, because the last 30 minutes became the same. We have to fight the Sky Man, giant person, and put the thing in the hole and blow up the other thing that we've seen before. And I felt like it all just kind of, you have that little bit with Yondu at the end that kind of brings the heart back around that I liked, but the third act for me had some major problems.
So I guess when I talk about expectations, I'm talking about it, like you say, twofold. One is as an audience member, because the truth is we bring all of ourselves into our viewing experience, right? Yeah. Where you are that day, what's going on in your life, all of that plays into how you perceive and receive a movie. Having said that, I do want to see this again to see, with those now that out of the way, how I really feel about the film. Because I think you're right in the sense that a couple of the things that I picked up here was that Marvel was also struggling with that. They did not want to disappoint a viewing audience who expected great music, a wonderful soundtrack that drives it forward, who expected quips from the characters. And they do have to set up certain things moving forward in their universe, which also makes it a little problematic and challenging.
This is a long movie, very long movie. And it kind of feels its length to me a little bit.
Well, where I think you could have trimmed, even with doing things, and again, this is totally spoilers, even doing things like setting up the Ravengers, right? And maybe a spin-off movie there. Yeah. You still could have pulled back on, say, the Sovereign, right? So that joke about the Sovereign kind of playing video games as their method of war, which is frankly a brilliant use.
They do twice. They do two
technology.
Big sequences of that.
Exactly. We didn't need it twice. I felt the same. It felt repetitive to me. The first joke, I got it. I enjoyed it. Then we just sort of need to see them come in at the end and you already know what's going on. That's fine.
Right.
But having said that, what I think that they did very, very well was within all of those confines, which is quite a challenge, still deliver a script that pays off what we want, and that gives us something new, and that tells in many ways a complex story for a comic book movie.
Right.
Which is not to dismiss comic book movies, about family and connection, right? True. Because, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and I like the way that they addressed that within the Guardians. I think, again, the whole turn with Ego, and with Ego being the villain, I think the biggest problem I had with it, and for a while it was bugging me, I'm like, why does this bug me so much? And then I realized that Star-Lord's turning point in this movie is kind of the exact same turning point as Tony Stark had in Civil War. It's, I don't care, you killed my mom.
Prepare to die.
Literally, I mean, like that's what snaps him out of it. And in Civil War, that's what gets Tony Stark to, fight Cap. Really, that's what sends him over the edge for those two to fight each other. And then even going as far back as Batman v Superman, a little bit different. There's a lot attached to it. But again, the theme of like the mother character is the turning point, and I feel like comic book movies are really kind of relying on these parent issues. Thor was about daddy issues. Amazing Spider-Man 2 was about parent issues, and now Civil War is, and now this movie is, and to a lesser extent Batman v Superman was as well. And I just feel like I think the reason that people do that is because it's relatable, because everybody has parents and you feel very strongly about your parents. But to see Marvel go back to that well again here, and like I said, you built up a lot, this very complex relationship between Kurt Russell, who I thought was great, by the way, proves why he's still a movie star. You've built up this very complex relationship between these two characters. And then it's just kind of like, oh, I'm evil and we're going to fight.
Right.
And they never really pay that off. It just becomes, again, fight the Sky Man.
Sure.
And that's where it lost me, was like, it was kind of taking an unconventional route and really took a lot of time to set this dynamic up. And then it was like, twist, fight, movie's done.
I think one of the reasons that comic book movies are so prevalent right now is that they are archetypal. Right? Yeah. Like, we don't really have those myths. Oddly enough, Kong Skull Island director Jordan Vogt Roberts and I talked about this in our interview. We really don't have them in our culture. I think that we're finding it there. Yeah. And archetypal doesn't mean shallow. It does mean broad to some degree.
Sure.
And so if you think about parents and how they affect your life, each and every one of us is walking around a result of our childhoods.
Sure.
It carries into the whole rest of your life. It shapes 100% who you are. So I don't have a huge problem with drawing from that well, particularly for movies like this.
Well, yeah, and I get, like, superheroes, so many of them have Batman, Spider-Man.
Sure, yeah.
Like, it's all about parents. Yeah. I get that. I don't mind that element of it. I get that in superhero storytelling, that is a big part of it. It's this thing of the movie, the crux of the movie turns on this you killed my mom.
Prepare to die.
Prepare to die. And it's not so much that you're using parents, it's that they now two big Marvel movies in a row have used the same mechanics.
Fair enough.
To turn their plot.
Right.
And it's like there's so much that you can kind of pull from, and to me it just seemed a little easy for that, because like what would turn an audience and a character against another character quicker than you killed my parents?
Sure.
That's, of course you're gonna turn and justify anything if that's the motivation. So to me, it felt like, really, that we're gonna go back here again,
Right.
and then what follows is, again, they don't revisit that complexity with Kurt Russell. I mean, once Kurt Russell, I don't think he even comes back as a human being again after he blows up into a giant man, and it seems like a big build up to an easy twist and kind of a no payoff, because you kind of moved to Yondu, which that was set up a little bit in the movie, but not quite as well as it could have been, I think. And it's emotional because they make that moment work. But I think overall, I came out of Guardians thinking like, wow, that was a great movie. I really liked that movie. And I came out of this movie saying like, there were a lot of great moments that I loved. I loved that moment when. But the movie itself, I'm a little more like,
Feels fragmented.
It feels very fragmented to me.
So I don't disagree with that. I still really, really enjoyed it. And I think I probably will enjoy it on a second and third viewing. But for those reasons, right? So here's what I think it did really well.
Yeah.
I think it established that these characters are now a team.
Yeah.
And they're now on adventures together. I think what it did well was choose not to have an overt villain, because certainly that's been an issue, as we know. Instead, it introduced a character in Kurt Russell, which, as you know, I am a massive Kurt Russell fan. But what's great about that casting is so obvious. Like, who else would play Chris Pratt's dad?
Right.
He's the perfect person because Chris Pratt is the Kurt Russell of his generation, right? He has all that charm.
He does.
He does.
Yeah, he does. He's got the humor. He can do the leading man thing. He can do the comedy thing.
So
he can,
likable.
very relatable. Every man. I can see
every
that.
man,
Yeah.
all of it. So it makes sense to me. And then you bring him in and you subvert those expectations by making him a guy that is full of ego. A little on the nose, sure, but it's the actual character's name.
It's
so it's a comic book. Yeah, it's a comic book.
Yeah.
So what I think worked really well about that and was deftly done in this script, in which James Gunn did have demands on him to meet certain expectations from Marvel, is that he was still able to talk about not just what it is to be a dad, Yondu versus ego, right? What is it to be a dad and be imperfect but present, which Yondu was, and try and take care of him, or a dad and be absent, which ego was, which is like, okay, well, you just are a sperm donor at that point. But also just connection. Ego is this being that desperately wanted to connect, and because he was disappointed by other people because they were not perfect, and he is, and like they play on this with the Sovereign as well, he then wants to be everything because he can't connect to another person that isn't him.
Right.
And so I think that's really interesting when you have a group like the Guardians to have that playing out in the background, because they're all really, really flawed and broken, but they're still able to accept each other. And to me, that is a complex idea, because you love somebody not in spite of their imperfections, but because of.
Sure.
Right?
And that's the great dynamic about the team. I think that was established in the last movie, though. To me, it was like the Guardians were the imperfect team that came together at the end of the last Guardians movie. And the movie that I kind of compared it to in my head a little bit, and I like this movie a lot better than this one, but it reminded me a little bit of Star Trek Into Darkness, in that it's the second movie with this new crew, but it expects you to pay off character moments between them that you don't quite know if they're earned yet.
Yeah.
And it ends kind of in the same place as the end of the previous movie, where it's like, okay, we kind of got over our issues and now we're together.
Right.
And I feel like this movie a little bit, there was some character development that's done. We'll see where that goes in the next one. But it just kind of had that feel of, we have a lot to accomplish, and that's every sequel. We have a lot to accomplish, and not all of it is quite done as well as it could have been.
Sure.
Again, I didn't dislike this movie. This is a movie I enjoyed, but I had, some problems with it.
I mean, again, I think they set themselves up in a way to have to pay off who his dad was in this movie by the end of the last movie. If you think about like creativity working within confines. I mean, that's sort of where I'm looking at it too, which is not to say I'm excusing any of the things that you're saying, because I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah.
But when I think about what it takes to actually have those levels of confines, like you've got to introduce this thing that might play out and that thing that might play out, but it has to feel like it's part of the story. I think he did that very well, meaning James Gunn, in the writing and sort of in the direction. It does have a lot of heart to it. It doesn't feel entirely manipulated, which I think these things really can.
It definitely can.
You know? And it introduces Mantis, and she's got this great relationship with Drax, and that's a new relationship that we're going to love to see develop. He didn't fall back too much on the same trope. He subverted tropes like he did with Kurt Russell. Now, I will say for me, that Ego was not a great guy was telegraphed pretty early on.
Yeah.
But it still paid off in the sense of like, he even opens the movie, instead of Star-Lord doing the dancing musical number on his own.
We have Groot.
We have Groot.
Right.
And so he's saying Star-Lord's not alone anymore in this, right?
To me, it said, we're marketing this movie and I'm putting the cutest character in the credits. That's what it said to me.
That's not what it said to me. Honestly, what it said to me is that we're going to play into and we're going to tell you what this movie is right here.
Yeah.
This movie is everything you're going to want to see from the first one, but flipped a little bit, right? Now we're going through Baby Groot. Now they're a team. This is who these people are to each other now after this time has passed.
It did do that thing, though, where it's like, now they're a team, but they're not. Now they're a team, but we're splitting them up.
Right.
I hate that. I hate that. Because Star Trek did that in the last one, too. It's like, now they're a crew, but they're going to crash and split up, and they're going to be apart for most of the movie. I'm like, no, they're a team. Put them together. That's why we like them.
I didn't think it was now they're a team that they're not. But I thought it was now they're a team, and that's hard, because here's the truth is, now you're a family. That doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean you don't disagree.
But you have to see them be a family a little bit more before you can split them apart, because it's tough being a family. They skip the part where it's tough being a family. It's like they're family and then they're not. Again, it's dramatic. It's drama, and I understand. But.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I sort of found it to be particularly with a film that, look, I expect different things from different films.
Sure.
I go into, we need to talk about Kevin and expect a different examination.
Well, obviously, yeah. This is not we need to talk about Kevin.
Of family relationships, right?
Ezra Miller might be playing The Flash, but it's not the same kinds of movies.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't sort of expect the level of depth and darkness and nuance in a Marvel movie. I go in there with certain expectations, and they do have an obligation to some degree. The audience would be very betrayed.
Yeah.
If they didn't fulfill some of those expectations.
No, I understand that. And I'm going to head off people saying, like they did with you in the original review, like, oh, all you're saying are things that you didn't like about it. Why don't you just say that you didn't like it? And that's not true. This is not a movie that I disliked. I think you can like a movie, but have, issues with how the story is told. And again, there are a lot of great things about this movie, the cast, the humor, the stuff like that I enjoyed. It's not binary. It's not hate and love. It's I'm in the middle. But there's that thing of the expectation. and I agree. You go into different movies expecting different things. I interviewed Leonard Maltin on the set at the end of last year, and I kind of asked him, because I'm fairly new to the critic game. Like, a lot of people say, like, oh, don't go to Ninja Turtles expecting Hamlet. So why are you bashing it? And it was a great piece of advice. He said, of course, there's different expectations for every movie, but your job as a critic is to go into a Ninja Turtles movie saying, I want this to be the best Ninja Turtles movie it can be. And that's what I took into Guardians. Obviously, I'm not expecting a deep, heavy family drama, but that doesn't excuse things with the story, with the structure, with the setup, with the payoff, with some thematic elements that I think are overused. Obviously, I'm not expecting this to be, Gone with the Wind or Lawrence of Arabia, but that doesn't mean that you can't point out problems, instead of just kind of hand waving and saying, like, well, but it's a Guardians movie, so you really need to expect different things. And that's not what you're saying, but that's what a lot of people say is, like, what do you expect? It's a comic book movie. Like, that's true. But that doesn't mean that you have to completely discard any notion of criticism and just looking at how a story's told.
No, absolutely not. And I think that the point that you raised that I want to double down on is that these things are not binary. I mean, maybe they are for some people, but they're not for me, certainly.
Not. It's many shades of gray, except for 50 Shades of Grey, which is objectively terrible.
Objectively terrible, exactly.
That is binary.
Very, very few things, and we've talked about this before, very, very few things are categorically worthless.
Yeah.
or brilliant,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Very few things. Most things are like, okay. Most things in life are okay.
75% of the things that are made, of movies that are made, are somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
And there's like, I don't know the math in my head anymore, but just split it in half and 12.5% on either side.
I would 100% agree with you. And then if you look at something like a sequel that is I think the example of a sequel well done, brilliantly done is Godfather 2, right?
Absolutely.
Which is just a completely different film.
It is.
It's just a completely different movie, right? Yeah. Brilliant film. Now, when we're looking at this, I am not excusing, because I agree with you. I think it does return to the well of certain jokes too many times. Yeah. It does start to feel fragmenting to me in certain moments, and as if it's trying to serve many masters. Yeah. And then the end, I agree with you, becomes this final epic battle sequence that we've seen play out many, many times. And it would be a beautiful thing if they would take a risk and just not do that.
Just not do it.
Have a smaller conclusion.
But I think you're right. People would feel betrayed as if they didn't get their money's worth because there wasn't this huge spectacle. But if you're gonna break the mold, someone has to be the first one to do it.
Someone does, and certainly Logan did that. It's a very different type of movie, but it told you in the marketing that it was a very different type of movie. You knew that going in. Yeah. It was a cheaper movie to make. I'm just trying to talk about the pragmatic realities of all this money time is invested in this. They don't want to betray the audience so much that the audience won't come back again. Yeah. Right? But they do want to bring some new things to the table. And I think he did a good job of that, of finding that balance. I don't think it's a perfect movie, and I don't think it's a perfect Guardians movie either. I think Guardians 1 is a perfect Guardians movie for me. Yeah.
Guardians 1 is the best Guardians movie you could go in there and expect to get.
Exactly.
I think that is the best Guardians of the Galaxy movie that you could hope for.
But there were moments in this movie that I felt were really like just the playing the ball with the ball, that moment.
100%. That's what saves it, is that there are moments. James Gunn knows these characters. He loves these characters. He makes you love these characters through his love for these characters. That's what saves this movie is the cast and just James Gunn's ability to just have his enthusiasm come out of the screen onto you. Like he doesn't just love these characters. He wants you to love them. And he largely succeeds. Yeah. And that's what makes the movie work.
I agree. And some of those moments, that one in particular, felt to me like it was executed really with a kind of level of brilliance, because it's funny. Yeah. It's very silly. It tells you so much about who these people are, about who Ego is. I found in that moment, I understood that he was playing Peter, that he was playing on his emotions, and that the thing that was important to him was whatever this energy ball was going to be. And it told you all of that without saying anything, just in a visual moment. I thought that using Brandy the way he did was brilliant. You know, it's this silly song, right? But he used it with such emotional depth. Yondu's payoff, which I thought was set up in the first film, actually. It wasn't just a surprise in this one. All of that worked for me to say, you know what? There is so much to this movie that it does outweigh for me the flaws that I agree are there.
Right. I mean, bottom line, if we're going to diagram this, if this is great and this is terrible, like you're here and I'm here. And that's
pretty close.
It's pretty close. Again, it's so... like I said, middle of the pack Marvel movie for me. Still a movie that I enjoyed. I would still recommend, people to go see it. Just because I didn't come out, pumping my fists and waving my arms in the air and saying, oh my God, I can't believe how great that movie was, it doesn't make it a bad movie.
Not at all. And we're going to talk about here on News all of the things that you guys are probably talking about, setting up Adam Warlock, the post-credit scenes, all of the Easter eggs. There were
Jeff Goldblum was in there. Did you see him?
Yes,
Goldblum. Got
pretty
a Goldblum.
Amazing.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
You got Howard the Duck again.
Howard the Duck again. In the movie this time.
Actually.
Good to see Howard. I never thought I'd say it's good to see Howard the Duck, but it was good to see Howard the Duck. And the Watcher theory with Stanley. So much stuff going on. I love that they're taking him just completely self-referential, because that's really the only way you can make any of that make sense.
Absolutely. I think that it had a lot of fun with playing on the Marvel Easter eggs and tropes that people have grown to love. Those are our final thoughts about Guardians, but what we want to know is what you think in the comments below. You can also tweet at us at SJ News, at me, at Roth Cornett.
At Merle Dan, you can ask me what happened to my face.
Yeah, well, he had a...
I called Rocket a raccoon.
Yeah, well...
That's what happened.
Rocket saw our review somehow psychically in the future. It's a whole thing that's
Rocket
going
was
to play
happy
out.
with what I had to say about the third act structure of this movie.
That's what you get when you piss off a talking raccoon with guns.
That's what happens.
That's what happens.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you think again in the comments below. And you can always click here for more Screen Junkies news.